Rory Blackwood's raven hair cascaded like a waterfall down her back as she scanned the crowded room, her piercing green eyes narrowing in disdain. She hated these pretentious charity galas, where the rich and powerful mingled with their own kind, leaving genuine causes to suffer. Her job as an event coordinator was to make sure everything ran smoothly, but that didn't mean she had to enjoy it. As she made her way through the sea of smiling faces, a hand grasped her elbow, spinning her around to face a towering figure in a tailored suit. Kael Jensen's piercing blue eyes locked onto hers, his chiseled features a map of sharp angles and piercing intensity. "You're not exactly blending in, are you?" he sneered, his voice low and husky. Rory's gut instinct was to pull away, but her training kicked in, and she forced a polite smile. "Just doing my job, sir." Kael's gaze seemed to bore into her soul, as if searching for any sign of weakness. "I'm Kael Jensen," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "And you are?" Rory's fingers itched to deliver a sharp retort, but something about the cold calculation in those eyes made her hesitate. She introduced herself, and Kael nodded curtly, his gaze never leaving hers. The air around them seemed to vibrate with tension as they stood there, two opposing forces poised on the brink of conflict. Rory's eyes never left Kael's profile, her mind racing with 1,000 what-ifs. How did they end up like this? A charity gala gone awry, leading to a car ride that was equal parts awkward and inevitable. The silence between them was heavy with the weight of unresolved passion and clashing personalities. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to ease the stiffness that had nothing to do with the smooth road beneath them. Kael's gaze drifted from the darkness outside to hers, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers like a beacon calling out for connection. For a fleeting moment, Rory thought she saw a glimmer of understanding, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her feeling stuck and frustrated. The only sound was the hum of the engine, the soft crunch of gravel beneath the tires, and the pounding of their hearts in perfect sync. Why did this have to be so damn complicated? Rory's thoughts were a jumbled mess, her emotions teetering on the edge like a precarious balancing act. She couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead, as the darkness outside began to give way to the faint glow of city lights. Would they continue down this path of forced proximity, or would the tension ultimately prove too great to bear? Only time would tell. Rory sat in her dimly lit office, surrounded by the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the gentle tick-tock of the clock on her desk. The air was thick with tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something to crack open. She couldn't shake the memory of Kael's chiseled features, his piercing blue eyes burning a hole in her soul. The way he had whispered sweet nothings in her ear during that beach house night still lingered, a tantalizing promise of what could never be. Her fingers drummed against the armrest as she pondered the unspoken words between them, the secrets, the desires, and the undeniable attraction that simmered beneath the surface. A thrill coursed through her veins as she recalled the way Kael's rough fingertips had danced across her skin, leaving a trail of sparks in their wake. Her pulse quickened, her thoughts consumed by the man who had awakened a hunger within her. She let out a soft sigh, the sound lost in the darkness. "What am I doing?" she asked herself, as if the answer would magically appear on the pages of her worn leather journal. The silence was oppressive, heavy with anticipation for something to happen, or someone to break the spell. And then, like a whispered prayer, she heard it, the sound of Kael's footsteps echoing down the hallway, growing louder with each passing moment. Her heart skipped a beat as she wondered what he wanted, and what would happen if she let him in. The door creaked open, and Kael slipped into her office, his eyes locked onto hers like a magnet drawing steel to its core. "I couldn't sleep," he said, his deep voice husky with emotion. "And I couldn't help but think of you." Rory's breath caught as she met his gaze, the air crackling with anticipation. This was it, the moment when everything would change, or nothing at all. Rory's feet ached as she stood on her back porch, staring out at the lush greenery that seemed to mock her. The silence was oppressive, heavy with the weight of secrets and lies. She had been avoiding this moment for what felt like an eternity, but the truth couldn't be hidden forever. Kael's words still lingered in her mind, his tone a mixture of arrogance and desperation. You're mine, Rory. The way he said it sent shivers down her spine, but now she realized it was more than just a declaration of possession. It was a warning. A threat. A reminder that she was trapped in this toxic cycle with no clear escape route. Her eyes scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of Kael's presence. She knew he was out there, waiting for her to make another move. The air was thick with tension as Rory took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She had come too far to turn back now. It was time to face the music, no matter how painful the truth might be. With newfound determination, she turned away from the door and made her way into the darkness, the sound of crickets and rustling leaves accompanying her like a morbid symphony. Rory's eyes felt like they'd been scrubbed raw by the bitter tears that had streamed down her face. The darkness in her apartment seemed to closing in, suffocating her. She flopped onto the couch, her body heavy as if weighed down by the crushing regret that filled her chest. Why did I fall for him? She whispered to herself, the words barely audible over the sound of her own ragged breathing. The memories of their encounters, the whispered promises and tender touches, now felt like a cruel joke played on her. She had thought she'd seen glimmers of vulnerability behind Kael's mask, but it was all just an illusion. Rory's gaze drifted to the photograph of her parents, her eyes welling up once more as the pain of their loss threatened to consume her. "Why did you leave me?" she sobbed, the words lost in the darkness as she let herself succumb to the overwhelming grief. Rory's eyes fluttered open, the sterile hospital air filling her lungs as she gasped for breath. The memories of the night before came flooding back, Kael's reckless driving, his desperation to get to her, and the devastating truth he'd revealed, that he'd been hiding his true identity from her since the beginning. Her mind reeled as she pieced together the fragments of their tumultuous relationship. She thought about the way he'd manipulated her, used her for his own purposes, and yet, a part of her still yearned for him. The conflicting emotions churned inside her like a stormy sea, threatening to capsize her fragile psyche. As she struggled to come to terms with Kael's deception, a sense of resignation washed over her. She was trapped in this toxic cycle, unable to break free from the gravity of their twisted love. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she whispered to herself, "I'm so done." But her voice was barely audible, lost in the cacophony of machines and her own despairing thoughts. Kael's gaze drifted to the calendar on the wall, a constant reminder of the days ticking away, each one a symbol of his failure. He'd thought he could control Rory, manipulate her into loving him, but it had backfired spectacularly. His desperation had consumed him, driving him to make choices that would forever change their relationship. The weight of his mistakes crushed him, the guilt and shame threatening to suffocate him. As he stood there, frozen in regret, a single tear rolled down his cheek, mingling with the sweat and despair on his face. He whispered a silent prayer, begging for forgiveness not just from Rory but from himself. For the first time, he acknowledged that his obsession had become a toxic cancer, eating away at their love like a slow-burning fire. Kael's eyes locked onto Rory's, his gaze burning with an intensity that rivaled the sunrise. They were standing on the cusp of something, a precipice of revelation, confession, and surrender. The air was heavy with tension as they faced each other, their bodies swaying slightly in the gentle morning breeze. It was as if time itself had slowed to a crawl, giving them the space to confront the abyss that yawned between them. "I'm sorry," Kael whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of the city. "I'm so sorry." The words hung in the air like a challenge, an invitation for Rory to release her pent-up emotions and join him on the precipice. And as they stood there, suspended between the past and the unknown future, it was clear that their love had reached its breaking point, the moment of surrender that would forever alter their tumultuous relationship.